In this screencast, we're going to talk about naming molecular compounds. When we use that word molecular, keep in mind that we're talking about covalent compounds. And covalent compounds are formed between two nonmetals. So when you have two nonmetals that are combined to make a compound, we're talking about a covalent compound, which we call molecular compounds. That's what we're talking about naming in this screencast. Just as a refresher, remember on the periodic table there's a staircase that kind of goes down in this direction, okay? To the right of the staircase are the nonmetals. So these elements over here are the nonmetals on the periodic table, and the elements to the left are the metals. So when we talk about covalent compounds, we're talking about two of the elements that are on the right-hand side of the periodic table being combined. We can also have them combined with hydrogen as a nonmetal also. So we're talking about just a few of the elements from the periodic table, hydrogen plus these on the right side of the staircase, being combined to form our covalent compounds. When we name covalent compounds or molecular compounds, we use prefixes, and you should recognize most of these. Mono means one, di means two, tri means three, tetra means four, penta means five, hexa means six, hepta means seven, octa means eight, nona means nine, and deca means 10. We'll use these prefixes when we see the corresponding subscript in the formula. Our endings for molecular compounds, the second element is always going to end in IDE. Okay, so that's only for the second element. So for example, we'll have oxide or sulfide or something like that. So it's not the name from the periodic table, the name changes to end in IDE. For the prefix mono, it is never used on the first element. Okay, never on the first element. Every other prefix is used on the first element, but not mono. All of the prefixes, including mono, are always used on the second element. So let's work through some examples. First, we have CO. Notice that there's no subscript for carbon. So that means that we have a subscript of 1, but we never use the prefix mono on the first element. So it's just going to be carbon. And when we look at our second element, we see our subscript of 2. Our prefix for 2 is di, so it's going to be carbon dioxide. And notice we changed the ending of the name to IDE. Again, we have C with a subscript of 1 and O with a subscript of 1. Since we don't use the prefix mono on the first element, we're starting out with just the name carbon. But our oxygen here does have 1, and so we're going to use our prefix mono for that one. So this is carbon monoxide. And again, notice that the name ending changes to IDE. Next, for CCl4, our subscript on carbon is 1. We don't use the prefix mono on the first element, so our first part of the name is just simply carbon. Chlorine has a subscript of 4. Our prefix for 4 is tetra. And we're going to change the ending to IDE, so we have carbon tetrachloride. Now in this one, we have a little difference because our first element does have a subscript other than 1. So we have 2 nitrogens. The prefix for 2 is di, so we have dinitrogen. Notice that even when we add a subscript for the first element, the name doesn't change. It's dinitrogen, the name of the element. We have 4 oxygens, so that's going to be tetraoxide. Again, notice the ending on the second element is IDE. At the end of your notes, make sure that you name the 4 compounds that are listed on this page. Use the prefixes and remember that the second element's name must end in IDE. If you have questions, please ask Mrs. Benke in class. Make sure you show Mrs. Benke your answers to these problems as well as your notes.